The forest. Stands of balsam, Douglas fir, hemlock, cedar, pine, and spruce. The forest has always been one of British Columbia's most valuable natural resources. It was part of the everyday life of native people and early settlers, and became an important source of income as the economy of BC developed. Today, the forest is the basis of the province's major industry. But the era of giant trees and seemingly endless forest is almost over. Now we face the prospect of reduced rates of harvesting in the future. A number of factors have contributed to what is known as the fall-down effect. The province is now nearing the end of its supply of accessible, high-quality, old-growth timber. Natural regeneration is a slow process, and new growth does not match the volume from trees that stood for centuries before being cut. At the same time, the increased use of forest land for agriculture, industrial and urban development, recreation and wildlife reserves is reducing the area where timber can be grown. Trees are important because they're a renewable resource, while forests are vital to the social and economic well-being of the province. The British Columbia Ministry of Forests has taken action to reduce the impact of this fall-down effect by introducing programs of accelerated reforestation and more intensive forest management. In the natural forest, trees may grow far apart, wasting productive space, or they may be so crowded together that growth is slowed down. The Forest and Range Resource Analysis pinpointed the need for improved silviculture, and with the 1978 Forest Act, intensive forest management practices were implemented on a large scale. Wood yields from existing stands can be increased by thinning and fertilizing. Wood production from new stands can also be increased by planting tree species best suited to a particular location. These benefits, however, can be maximized if the plants used have been specially bred for increased growth and resistance to insects and diseases. To this end, the Ministry of Forests has embarked on a long-range program of tree improvement through the development of genetically improved seed for future reforestation. The potential for bigger and better trees is illustrated by the results obtained in an experimental plantation. The wide annual growth rings on this cross-section indicate free and rapid growth throughout the life of a 30-year-old tree. This second cross-section is also from a 30-year-old tree. It shows the same growth pattern, but its larger size reflects additional gains which could be obtained by using seed of superior genetic quality. Essentially, it is the goal of the tree improvement program to produce trees like this on a large scale and in all the major species. The very first stage of tree improvement involves the selection of the basic raw material. For a start, the natural variation and adaptability and growth characteristics must be studied. The place of origin, or provenance of a population of trees, represents the first level of variation.
We have trees growing here from a wide collection of seed sources between Charlotte Islands, Alberta, northern Alberta, Mount Watts.
Tests are carried out to measure species variability and to record how well seedlings will grow when moved from their place of origin to a new location with different soil and climatic conditions. A typical provenance trial is described by Keith Illingworth of the Ministry of Forests.
Tree species which occupy a wide geographic range normally have a lot of variation in them. And lodgepole pine extends from California up into the central Yukon. That's a range of something like 33 degrees of latitude. Take, for example, this tree here. It's one of a plot of 30 that we have here, and it comes from Bucks Lake, which is in the California Sierras at an elevation of 1,600 meters. They normally have an open cone and short, rather stiff needles. As you can see, they don't do very well in British Columbia. They are rather lacking in vigor. Whereas if you compare it with this next plot over here, this particular population comes from the mouth of the Columbia River at Long Beach on the Washington coast. And it's rather interesting because, quite aside from the fact that there's a tremendous difference in vigor, it's a population which has done extremely well in many countries throughout the world.
The next level of variation is the difference between individual trees. Once a desired population has been identified, individual trees are selected for breeding tests. Some of the desired characteristics are outlined by forester Chris Heeman.
This is the progeny from one of the good trees that was selected in this study. And you can see it has the characteristics of the trees we're looking for in our breeding program. What we're looking for is a tree which has a straight stem, a very woody stem. There's lots of wood volume in the stem. You've got short branches, and this represents the good family.
The Natural Forest of BC provides the raw material for tree improvement research. Throughout the province, thousands of plus trees have been identified. They are tall and straight, superior in form and volume to the trees in the stand around them. These plus trees are to be parent trees in the breeding programs and operational seed orchards. The physical process of tree improvement begins with the collection of scions, or twigs, from a plus tree. In this case, a coastal Douglas fir. Douglas fir plus trees have been located throughout the coastal regions, and the scions from each tree are taken to a forest experiment station, where they're grafted onto rootstock. All the new growth above the graft has the genetic qualities of the scion. The resulting tree retains all the genetic qualities of the original parent tree. Grafting is an effective method of propagation, but it must be done expertly for the trees to survive. The grafts may be placed in a clone bank, a plantation where trees of known origin are kept in case anything happens to the original tree in the field, and where breeding work can take place. Some grafts will go straight to the seed orchards for the production of seed for reforestation.
Here we have a line of trees that are grafted, all from one parent tree, and I want you to see the uniformity within this tree. How the branches are all the same angle, they're all straight, lovely straight grafts, they're all about the same height, the foliage color is the same. These show the characteristics of an individual tree.
When male and female flower buds appear, the testing and breeding phase of tree improvement begins. The ripe male buds shed pollen, which is carried by the wind to fertilize female buds on neighboring trees. The pollen may also be collected for breeding purposes. In controlled pollination, bags prevent the natural pollination of the flowers by wind-blown pollen from the surrounding areas. The bags enable the breeder to add pollen from a selected male parent at the appropriate time, and also protect the developing cone from insect damage. In the fall, the cones are harvested. At all stages of the process, careful records are kept.
Okay, bud. 30241 has 3 cones.
When the cones are dry, the seed is shaken out. The filled or viable seeds are separated from the debris. In the spring, the seeds are sown in nurseries, and later the seedlings planted in different locations to test their performance.
This is an example of a tree which we might be selecting to use for future breeding work amongst our progeny test plantations. The objective of the plantations are to test the trees, test the parents, and to find the superior progenies, the superior families, and the superior trees which we're going to use in place of the plus trees. We look at its form. Its form is adequate. It isn't a very fancy form, but it's very vigorous. And this is the sort of tree we'll be selecting possibly for use in the future breeding programs and for future seed orchards. We know the parents of this tree, and we know it's been spaced, its age. We can select much more rigorously in a test plantation.
The oldest tree improvement program in BC has focused on coastal Douglas fir, but similar work has been going on in the interior for more than a decade. The differences between good and poor progeny are evident in this plantation, a progeny test of interior spruce in north-central BC. The process of selection and reselection is continual. Poor performers are rogued, removed from the breeding program and from the seed orchards. New combinations are chosen to serve as the next breeding and seed-producing material. The tree improvement activities are similar for all the major species, but actual techniques vary to meet local conditions. In central BC, interior spruce signs are collected in winter. For the crew in the helicopter, it's cold and noisy, but the process is fast and efficient.
The biggest problem with tree selection or collection of material in the central interior is the access to the parent tree in the wintertime. There is just so much snow and so many difficulties in getting into isolated areas that a helicopter or a plane of some sort must be used. And by using the helicopter, we can obtain up to 20-25 trees in one day. You're only visiting the tree once. You're selecting and collecting at the same time. This is extremely important in our work because we've got only a 3 or 4 week period in which to collect from 300 parent trees.
Give me the end of the tape then. Okay.
At the same time as scions are collected, more information about the tree is gathered and recorded. Wood characteristics are considered, one of the most important ones being specific gravity, a measure of wood density. High wood density means stronger wood and higher pulp yields, and in many species this desirable trait is inheritable. Specific gravity is determined from analysis of a core sample, which also reveals the age of the tree. The grafting of lodgepole pine is similar to the procedure for other species. Technician Sven Anderson outlines the major steps.
Insert the scion so the growing layers match up. Take the tie and wrap around the two components to hold them firmly together. And end the tine well below the bottom part of the scion. We have to also wax any cut exposed surfaces to prevent the sign from drying out. Like so.
In some species, it is possible to plant the cuttings directly. This works well with western hemlock. Controlled greenhouse conditions extend the grafting season and raise the survival rate of the young trees. This environment also promotes the development of strong, fast-growing trees, which are desirable for both research and seed orchard purposes. Because so many variables have to be considered at all stages of the tree improvement process, a wide array of experimental work has to be done, and sometimes changes have to be made. For example, interior spruce were growing well enough in north-central BC, but very few flowers were produced. Much better results were obtained when the experimental program was moved to the Okanagan area. And while the breeding is going on, the practical goal of the tree improvement program, the production of seed for reforestation, is not forgotten. As the experience with interior spruce suggests, the location of seed orchards is of primary importance. Cone production is enhanced wherever conditions are most favorable for rapid growth and the frequent and abundant production of flower buds. In BC, those conditions are most often found in the southern half of the province, and all aspects of seed orchard management are directed toward increased seed production. During the establishment phases, site preparation is carried out to allow for efficient management of the orchard. Regular cultivation practices contribute to the well-being of the young trees. As trees near the productive stage, a variety of management techniques are applied. This machine is being used for root pruning. Root pruning can be used to reduce the normal intake of moisture and nutrients, and a tree reacts to the stress of that limitation by replacing vegetative growth, branches and needles, with reproductive growth, that is, flower buds and cones. Wind-blown pollen from surrounding trees is not wanted in the seed orchard, and it is impractical to put bags on all the trees of a large orchard, so the trees are cooled by water to hold back flower development and screen out the local pollen. After the surrounding trees have shed their pollen, the flowers on the seed orchard trees are allowed to reach maturity. In this way, only the seed orchard trees will pollinate each other. Just before the pollen is shed, these pollen buds may be picked by hand. The buds are spread on trays, and as they are dried in a warm air system, the pollen is shed. The collected pollen is then available for application to other trees, or it may be stored for future use. In production seed orchards, the trees are set out in such a way that they will cross-pollinate each other naturally. But in the early productive life of an orchard, there is not enough natural pollen to produce a large seed crop, so suitable pollen collected from other sources is applied. The goal of this type of booster pollination is to maximize seed production by getting the optimum amount of pollen to the receptive buds in the most efficient way possible. As well, through booster pollination, it is possible to broaden the genetic base of the next generation of trees, offering more possibilities for improving the stock. The effectiveness of different methods of pollination is tested by physiologist Joe Weber.
We put on these pollen monitoring devices, which with a sticky substance captures the pollen available to the flowers, and then we attempt to relate the pollen available to this tree, available to these flowers, to the actual seed yield that we'll get after boosting. To improve production in all seed orchards, and in particular young seed orchards where pollen production is low, we are testing various techniques to artificially increase the pollen supply to the female flowers. And the resultant seed yields are related to the technique used to apply the pollen and the level of pollen supply. Our testing is trying to optimize the cost of pollen picking with application techniques to produce satisfactory seed production.
Insects and disease present a special threat to seed orchards, as they do to fruit orchards. Spraying is necessary, and the effectiveness of different sprays is checked. On smaller projects, direct action such as bagging can be taken to protect trees from damage. But total protection is almost impossible to achieve. Cone and seed insects are the major cause for concern. Two of the most damaging of these are the gall midge and the cone bug, Leptoglossus occidentalis. The larvae of the gall midge enter the cone and eat the seeds from the inside. With the cone bug, it is the adult that does the damage. The bug acts like a mosquito, puncturing the seeds with a long proboscis before sucking out their contents. In the natural forest, a good cone crop may occur only once in 15 years, but each fall in the seed orchards, the cones are picked. The amount of cone production is recorded, and each batch of cones is clearly identified. Finally, the seeds are extracted, cleaned, and stored in readiness for sowing the following spring. The tree improvement program is a vast and complex undertaking, and since plentiful and healthy trees are the necessary basis for a thriving forest industry, many of the major forest companies in BC play an active role alongside the government in the program. Technical planning committees meet several times a year to decide upon targets and the best ways to achieve them.
Well, which I don't think should influence us in this case. And I certainly feel we shouldn't be putting Oregon person. I wouldn't mind a few Washington, and we've got 12 Washington at one point.
Let's wrap it up then and come up with the recommendations for our next January 81 revision.
Fine.
It is an exciting and challenging time for everyone connected with the tree improvement program in British Columbia. A new attitude toward forest resources is being developed, which will affect not only the forest industry, but the overall economy of the province. At this moment, the tree improvement program is just getting off the ground, but already we're producing enough seed to grow 5 million improved seedlings annually. With continued effort and investment, the combination of genetically improved seed and intensive forest management can provide increased quantities of wood in the future.